Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Free Range Conversations with American Farmland Trust live stream. I'm your host, Greg Plotkin. Today, we're talking about the climate benefits of healthy soils, current science and implementation. I'm super excited to have two of, I think, the country's leading soil health specialists with us today. First, we've got Dr. Bianca Mobius-Clune, who is AFT's climate director. Before joining AFT, Bianca served as the founding director of the Soil Health Division with USDA NRCS from 2014 to 2011. And in her current role at AFT, Bianca leads AFT's efforts to harness the potential of our nation's farmers and ranchers to help mitigate the impacts of climate change through research, policy development, and on-the-ground implementation of regenerative farming practices. And then we're super excited to have Barry Fisher, our special guest. After spending, almost 40 years at USDA NRCS, Barry's now the president at Fisher Soil Health LLC, where he provides training and helps develop advanced soil health management systems for farmers and ag professionals. He's one of the leading soil health specialists in the Midwest and is well known for his expertise in helping farmers implement no-till and cover cropping systems on their land. Welcome to you both. I'd like to remind everyone that this is a live conversation, and a big part of this is hearing from you, our supporters. So if you have a question for Bianca or Barry, just chat it into whatever social media platform you're viewing this on, and we'll do our best to get to it on the call today. So let's dive right in. Bianca, you recently came over to AFT to lead our climate program. Can you talk a little bit about your work at NRCS and how that's translating to what's going on at AFT?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And thanks everybody for joining today. Really excited to be on this. I had the privilege to build the NRCS Soil Health Division with an amazing team, a lot of dedicated, knowledgeable, passionate staff and partners who helped us accomplish that. And so at NRCS, we trained thousands of conservation planners, partners, farmers across the country with a team. We had a team of about 20. That team is still doing amazing work across the country. And so really excited about all the stuff that we did and what they continue to do there. We did everything from providing training, building rigorous curriculum to really get continuity of message across so that we're really building out the way that soil health gets put on the ground by farmers and through all of the agricultural service providers. We developed in-field and laboratory soil health measurement standards. And so those are now used to identify soil health problems. The NRCS refers to those as resource concerns. And essentially it's like taking soils to the doctor to figure out what is the problem and how we can fix that. And so that's happening across the country now, which is really exciting. We updated practice standards and added some new. So basically that's the way that the agency provides instructions for how to implement these practices on farms. And one of the things the agency can now do, for example, is help farmers apply biochar, which was something new that we added in addition to all of the other amazing practices that really build healthy, high-functioning soils like cover crops, no-till, crop rotations, rotational grazing, and many other practices. We also had the opportunity to lead the establishment of the technical approach to the soil health demonstration trials that were funded in the last Farm Bill. And that's been really exciting, a lot of amazing work coming out of that. So in the meantime, I've transitioned to American Farmland Trust, and I'm really excited to work across this interdisciplinary, holistic team. I have seen in this organization an ability to work across all the disciplines, to share joint language, and to really work at the interface of how the whole agriculture system works together. We work on protecting the land itself, on enabling people of all demographics to manage that land in better ways for soil health and for mitigating climate change and building resiliency that we really need. And we're working on scaling up and improving the practices that all those folks adopt on diverse systems across soils, production systems, demographics, various different sizes, various different climates. That complexity is there. And AFT has both national initiatives that are more discipline targeted, and we have regional on the ground teams that really get at how we implement these things on the ground with the farmers who are in place there and with agricultural policymakers, with scientists across the whole agricultural community, all the folks who are stakeholders in agriculture. AFT works across that community at the regional levels and at the national level. So that's really exciting. Our goal is to really work on climate neutrality of agriculture. And I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think that it is possible. I think we shouldn't ask whether it's possible. I think we should ask how we're going to make it possible, because that possibility is definitely there. We are scaling that impact, and we need everybody at the table, whether you are a single person who eats and that's your connection to agriculture, or whether you are a farmer, whether you are someone who provides agricultural services. There are opportunities for everybody, small to large farms and ranches, including those who manage forests and woodlands. There are opportunities for individual farmers, for corporations, and for everybody who interfaces with them. And so that's an exciting space and really urgent needs. You know, we really need to get on top of this climate issue. And one of the great ways we need to do that, getting into strategies, we need to accelerate the adoption of regenerative agricultural practices. There are many things that many of us can do on that. Healthy soils are really critical to mitigating climate change and increasing resilience. Also, AFT works at the interface of protecting farmland and promoting compact growth, because when farmland is developed, that farmland, once developed, emits 50 to 70 times more, according to some studies, of greenhouse gases. And so if we can just prevent that development and keep that land in agriculture, ideally in regenerative agriculture, we can continue to sequester carbon instead of doing the opposite. Also, we're working at the interface of expanding smart solar siting. Solar developments are coming. They can be large. About 10 million acres are predicted to go into solar farms over the coming years. And doing that in a smart way, making sure that we're not losing our farmland, but that we are enabling that to happen, but in a smart, climate smart and regenerative and farm viability promoting way is really important. So our approach, we quantify and analyze impacts of programs and policies on the ground. We really work at the local level. We engage and educate stakeholders. We bring folks together, we bridge, we convene to really move the space forward. And all of that can inform and drive new policies so that we can make an impact. So really exciting interfaces, a lot of opportunities that everybody can be involved in. So excited, you know, I've never seen this much going on in the climate space. It's pretty amazing. I mean, even just the Secretary of Agriculture announced $1 billion for climate smart agriculture and markets to be adopted. I've never seen something of that size for soil health, regenerative agriculture, and climate. So really exciting to be working in this space.
And that's why we're so excited to have you at AFT, so you can help us take advantage of all those great opportunities, Bianca. Barry, before I pass it to you, I just want to remind everyone, this is a live conversation. We want to hear from you. If you have a question for Barry or Bianca, please type it into the comment thread on whatever social platform you're viewing this on, and we'll get to it in a little while. You know, Barry, you spent 40 years at USDA NRCS, so you probably have some pretty interesting insights on, you know, how soil science has changed in that time.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for letting me be a part of this conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. I've worked with AFT for many years, even prior to retiring from the USDA. We put together several really good advanced soil health trainings across the Midwest, and it's just been a great relationship. So it's a joy for me to get to participate in an event like this. So, yeah, in the 40 years that I worked for NRCS, I've watched this entire thing kind of evolve. We've always been good at erosion control, you know, at USDA and NRCS, but as we really got to combining some of these practices and seeing the benefits of systems and the synergy between practices, we quickly figured out that you know, soil health and soil function can really improve as we get these synergistic practices together. And so as I've worked for over the 40 years on these cropping systems, these advanced cropping systems, I have had the privilege to get to work with some of the best farmers across the whole country, and some of the best researchers and some of the top industry specialists and leaders and members from conservation organizations. So, boy, the combined effort of that knowledge pool to put together, you know, really strategic systems that are intentional toward improving soil health and soil function is so possible today. You know, the value of our information technologies and the way we can share information is such a tremendous asset to us today that we really didn't have in the early days. You know, it was you getting that information, trying to avoid mistakes that can occur when you're making major management changes. You know, these are a lot of pretty significant shifts for a lot of farmers, and so getting that technology and getting the technical assistance provided as these changes are being implemented, then, you know, that's really critical. And today it's very, very possible. And we're so fortunate today to have the technology and the information and the groups and the cooperation. You know, we have these partnerships developing across the country that are really important. So this is a very exciting era that we're in. And it's like Bianca said, it's not time to ask whether we should anymore. It's what is our best strategies forward to assure success in these transitions, because we're very, very sure that we can absolutely impact, you know, the climate, greenhouse gas emissions. We can improve agriculture at the same time. We know that this is possible with these practices, with these systems. It's a matter of how can we get the best strategies for each and every location and each and every enterprise that farmers are undertaking out there. So very exciting times.
And you make a good point. These transitions aren't without a cost, right? So the more information, the more proven information that we can provide to farmers about, you know, what practices lead to in terms of both the economic and environmental benefits that they'll receive, I feel like the easier it is to convince some farmers that, like, it is really important to adopt these practices. So it's great to see where the research has taken us. And that's really why we're here today, to talk about the science. So let's dig right into it. I'll start with you, Bianca. So, I mean, when it comes to the science behind soil health, what do we know? And maybe even more importantly, what don't we know?
You know, that's an excellent question. And it's a question that, you know, we can spend a few minutes on it, and we'll know that there are, you know, days and weeks and months worth of information and years worth of information. The amount of information that's out there in the scientific literature at this point, today even referred to directly as soil health, but often in past literature under soil quality, under conservation, under no-till agriculture. There's a lot of different terminology that has been used. But what is really clear today is that the soil health benefits are there. When we build these systems in a way that makes them function for the production system, the soils and the climate that they are being used in, these systems work to build high functioning soils. We know, and this is very clear, right? Plants photosynthesize, right? And there's not a problem with carbon itself. There's a problem that there's too much CO2 in the atmosphere right now, which originally came from the ground, right? I mean, fossil fuels are plants originally that became fossil fuels, and we just, you know, used them to provide ourselves energy. And so now we have that CO2 in the air. Well, guess what? Plants can put that CO2 back in the ground. And that's a key piece where agriculture and natural working lands in general can help, is to really harness the power of plants to bring that CO2 back into solid form, where it can build high functioning soils instead of causing extreme climate issues and increases in temperature. When we build soil health management systems that follow the principles of soil health management, we get high functioning soils, right? So those principles are to minimize disturbance, physical, biological, and chemical disturbance, to maximize cover on the soil. Those two principles protect that ecosystem that billions of organisms live in. If you think of the soil below your feet, a handful of that soil has more organisms in it than there are people on Earth. That's what we're managing. Farmers, ranchers across the country, those who manage natural working lands, are managing those billions of organisms that are in the soil. And those organisms are what drive function of that soil. So we need to protect them. The second two principles are to maximize biodiversity, whether that's through plants, animals, amendments, inoculants, feeding those microbiota, feeding all of the other organisms that are in the soil, making sure there's plenty of roots, and then to maximize the presence of living roots in the soil year round, right? If you think of a standard conventional production system, we have roots in the ground for only, from when we plant that crop until we harvest it, and then we have bare ground a lot of the time. And so that's part of what we're trying to get at. And we know that these practices work. One key thing where there's a lot of debate right now is whether no-till by itself can sequester carbon. When scientists look deeper in the soil, it turns out that in systems that have been tilled in some cases, but not in others, there's more carbon deep down in the soil that hasn't been looked at. But there are some things to think about here, which is one of them is that often they're looking at long-term no-till only, no-till versus conventional till studies. They're not looking at full systems. And no-till is really good at keeping carbon in the soil where it is, but no-till, just the lack of tillage by itself doesn't bring more carbon into the soil than a different system. Just there may or may not be more losses in a conventional tillage kind of situation. So I think a point that you'll find Barry and me driving home is that it needs to be a systems kind of approach. We need to build systems that address all of the soil health management principles, and then we will sequester carbon and we will reduce nitrous oxide emissions and methane emissions when we do that right, when we really put those practices in place to achieve those goals and the many other goals that we have for soil health management systems. Barry, maybe you want to talk a bit about all of what you've seen in terms of resilience. I know you've experienced some pretty amazing scenarios with extreme weather and what we know about how farmers can succeed when they put together these soil health management systems.
Right. Yeah. Here in the Midwest, we've been in a situation of climate extremes, weather extremes lately, where we know we're getting more rain, but we're not getting more rains. Mm-hmm. And the reality is that means when the rain does come, it comes really fast. But then it's longer periods between the rains. And so we need that ability to, when the rain comes, really infiltrate the water, hold the water. But then when the rain shuts off, we need resilience. We need that ability, that system that has the capability for plant roots to go deep, unrestricted. And so that's when we talk about some of the work that's been done, like in just say no-till by itself. A lot of our no-till in the Midwest, especially, my wife and I's farm is here in Indiana, so that's where I've spent most of my careers in the Midwest in corn, soybean country. And so if you think about a corn soybean rotation, it's not very diverse. And every other year you've got soybeans, which are not a real high carbon plant. And so it's very hard to truly build that resilience with just a no-till system. However, when you start adding some other practices with that, cover crops, of course, was a game changer. But if we can diversify our crop rotation, maybe add a small grain into that rotation, all of a sudden just those few little extra practices turn this into a very resilient system where now we've got deep root channels, we've got access to resources that crop otherwise didn't have access to. And so we can immediately have a much, much higher functioning system. And so that's what we spend a lot of time working on and looking at. And I think the new research, now that we start looking at some of this, especially research on the farms, we're going to see how resilient the systems can have much more quantifiable benefits than maybe we've been able to find in the past.
Your note about more rain but fewer rains, I think a lot of people in the comment thread are really responding to that. And as someone who lives in the Sierra Nevada, I am too, because we got 16 feet of snow in December and not one drop of rain since. So I think we're seeing it all across the country, in New England, in the Midwest, and out here in the West. We are getting some amazing comments that are coming in, so I want to pose a couple questions to you before we move on. The first one is from Laura, who is at NOFA, Mass, but is also a vegetable farmer. If a farmer is looking for scientific data that shows a climate benefit to healthy soils, what can we show them? And this could be a specific piece of research, this could be a website, or just anything that you have seen that really, a light bulb comes on and you're like, I get it now. What would you say?
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Barry.
Well, I mean, there are just really good books, and there's some recent editions that have come out, and I'll probably reach for it here. I mean, Sayre's new Building Soils for Better Crops. They've got a new edition out. It's a really straightforward lead that compiles a bunch of recent research and things like that, and it puts in a very practical text and things. So there's a lot of those kind of resources to them, and then at the same time, the Natural Resources Conservation Service put together a library of resources too that is publicly available. And I think actually the Soil Health Institute also has a really good library of scientific literature, and you can search by topic. So it's really an easy system to navigate if you're really looking for specific research publications. And sorry to cut you off, Bianca.
No worries. Those are some of the resources I would have pointed to. NRCS has a lot of fact sheets online. American Farmland Trust has the Farmland Information Center, and there's information there about soil health, regenerative agriculture, how to bring some of that to various different kinds of systems. Also how to integrate that with protected land. If there's any land conservation agencies online right now, land trusts and such, we're working currently on how to bring you all the resources so that you can work with landowners who have easements to help them better manage that land. So there are resources there. One key resource in terms of the economics of soil health, American Farmland Trust has been building out economic case studies, and those are co-branded with NRCS. And those case studies really show the return in dollars per acre, anything from, I think, about $20 per acre to 40, 60, and in almond growing operations in California, $600 per acre of returns from adopting soil health practices. So there's starting to be some really good data out there. Of course, the soil health demonstration trials that NRCS has been funding for the last few years, those are going to really put out some excellent data, and there's a lot of efforts afoot to put together national data sets that will then be available to the public so that everybody can learn from that. The open team community is pulling together a lot of different organizations to share data, allow farmers to input data and share to whatever extent they hope to do that. So more and more data is becoming publicly available, and that's certainly an interface that American Farmland Trust is also participating in, because I think there's so much data that farmers have today. Often they don't even know what to do with it, but building interoperable platforms so that farmers can share their data with researchers so that researchers can use real commercial on-farm data to do their analyses, to understand the full benefits economically, socially, and for the environment of these practices. There's a lot more happening in that space now.
We have so many good questions coming in. I want to get to one more before we move on, but just to remind everyone, if you have a question for Bianca or Barry, type it into the comment thread of the social platform you're viewing this on. If we can't get to it on the call today, I will personally go in afterwards and try and answer as many questions that I can. So we've got a question on LinkedIn from Heather Hunter, and she was wondering what advice you would give to new farmers looking to have the most impact on soil health. So farmers just getting started that, have to worry about just, growing food and a market to sell it. Like what would you say if they want to have a major impact on soil health? Bianca, we can start with you.
Yeah, I would actually punt over to Barry, because I think, Barry, you've worked with a lot of people Barry. Starting the transition. So beyond learning the basic principles of soil health to really understand why it's so important, I think there are some simple practices that folks can start with.
Yeah, have those 4 principles that Bianca mentioned in the back of your mind at all times, because think what those principles are doing. Those principles are essentially assuring that your farming operation has the habitat for that living soil ecosystem. And if you, in the back of your mind, with every operation, every management decision, are thinking, I still want to keep a really healthy environment for the soil ecosystem, if that's in the back of your mind and those 4 principles, then it will help you navigate through the choices of management that you have. Just understand that the biology is your friend, and anything that you can do to provide that cover mulch, compost, all of those things feed that biology and protect that biology. So no matter what kind of cropping system you're in, keeping it covered, maximize the cover, minimize the disturbance. One of the things that a new farmer gets trapped in is they think they got to control every weed, so they do a tremendous amount of tillage and disturbance, and they're constantly fighting the weeds and the pests in the soil through disturbance activities. And sometimes you have to back up and just say, hold on just a second. Is all of this disturbance knocking out the beneficial organisms? Are there unintended consequences of some of my activities? And you just have to make sure that you're also providing for the beneficial organisms as you try to grow the healthiest crop as you possibly can. You have to still protect your crop, but at the same time protect the beneficial organisms that are there in the soil that would be working 365 days a year, 24 hours a day for you.
That's a good answer.
Okay. And if I can just chime in, just one quick
Please.
thing, when you're a new farmer and you've got a lot to handle, there can be risks in adoption if you don't have a good mentor. If you can find yourself a mentor, an innovative farmer who's already doing it in your kind of production system, that's a great way to go. If you've got someone in extension, someone at NRCS, someone in a local soil health committee who knows about how to adopt these systems, get their help. And also maybe start small. Try it in a field so that you get some practice at putting in these new management systems and can learn without there being a big risk, so that you can really kind of learn with it and then grow it on your farm as you become successful. Those are definitely some things that have helped farmers, and stick with it. You're not going to get, if you have very degraded soil that you started with, it's going to take a while to build that back. And so just be aware of that. If you fail once in a field, don't give it up. Just get the advice that you need. There are more and more resources and people out there who really understand how to get these systems on the ground. So stick with it.
And that brings us into the next question, which I think is a good segue. Barry, we want to hear from you. You have so much experience seeing farmers, including yourself. You are a farmer in addition to, all of this kind of technical assistance work that you've done in your career, who've implemented soil health building practices on the ground. I'd love to just hear like a few highlights, like things that you've learned, things that have surprised you, anything that you would like to share about, your 40 years in doing this kind of work.
Well, I've just been so lucky. It's very few people get to go to work every day and feel good about what you've accomplished at the end of the day, and get to interact with some of the best all day long. So I've been very fortunate. There's very few, days that I didn't enjoy going to work. So during that time, though, I mean, the farmers just amaze me at their ability to adapt their management for whatever the weather gives them. In Indiana, we're, basketball really matters here. So I'll use a basketball context here, but, farmers have to be a really good game time coach, and you can go in with a really good game plan, but then you have to be able to read the defense, and in farming, the defense is the weather extremes, the pests, the whatever else throws at you, and then be able to call timeout and take a look and say, okay, how am I going to adapt my management? How am I going to change my course of action so that I can turn this into a positive rather than negative? And so the really top farmers that are such good managers from that standpoint. They're really good game time coaches, that they can make those game time decisions and read the defense. So that's the part that really amazes me, how, they've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars at stake with every decision that they make in many cases, some of these larger farms. So to make that decision with under all that kind of stress and pressure, it always just amazes me. But the other thing is that those farmers that have that ability, they also then have a great appreciation for having a system that's resilient. And they know that the more resilient of a system they can put together, the more they're going to more easily they're going to get through the defense. You know, they're going to get through this the whatever the weather hands them and nature provides for them. So at the end of the day, most will tell you that if they had a system that they could continually build carbon in the soil, build soil organic matter. They don't always talk about biology and that have that direct understanding that it's the biology that does that for them. But they all know that protecting soil organic matter and building soil organic matter, which ultimately is soil carbon, gives them a resilience that helps them get through all those situations. So that's always that has always really impressed me. And then I think that at the end of the day too, I'm always amazed how the best, even the best of the best farmers, the best business people, the ones that are most successful, are still almost always extremely willing to share their strategies and share their tactics with a new farmer coming in, with other farmers that are looking to adopt this. And so that willingness to share never ceases to amaze me. And of course, I've benefited from that, but so many farmers across the country have benefited from these networks of farmers that are now, and the networking is now easier with our technology and information system too. So that, I think that's probably my biggest amazement is how willing farmers are to share with other farmers, which technically in the business world you wouldn't share with your competition, right? But farmers do, you know, I think because they want what's good for the land, and their legacies are shared among farmers, and so they want other farmers' legacies to have the same advantage that theirs do, and so that ties them together, I think, as well.
And that brings us to a great question from one of our colleagues, Aaron. So Barry, thinking about this as another farmer, not, a soil health specialist, if you were talking to another farmer who is on the cusp of, trying some of these practices, are there like really key bullet points that you would use that you have worked or really resonate with folks?
Well, a real good example here in the Midwest with like corn bean farmers is if you want to try cover crops, be specific about what you want that cover crop to do for you. Are you trying to improve weed control? Are you trying to just do erosion control? How is that cover crop going to fit into your crop rotation? Is it going to complement, is the cover crop that you've chosen and the way you've chosen to manage it, is that going to complement the next crop in your crop rotation? Because at the end of the day, you've got to be successful financially, and economics has to work. So you don't want a train wreck just right. in the effort to implement a practice. So make sure that practice is strategic and it's going to complement the rest of your system. And so I see that a lot. Same way with no-till, a lot of people just decide one day they're going to stop doing tillage without a full understanding of how that changes your nutrient cycling, your water cycles, some of your other carbon cycles. And so having an understanding of how to fit the system, what is your best first step, at your location, for your enterprise, for your operation, for your equipment? Do you even have the equipment that's going to allow you to be successful? So there's a lot of little key points. So we got to find the best step in place. Where's the best place for you in your operation to step in? And don't look at a practice as though it's a thing. There's, whether it's no-till, whether it's cover crops, whether it's a good crop rotation, there are quality practices and there are just practices. So you have to manage that practice for your situation. And people talk about that being the context of your situation and how to implement those practices that's most logical for you.
And we have so many great questions. I'm going to take one more before we move on to finishing up. And Bianca, I think this is for you, and this might go to the decision maker's guide, but this is a question about how do we communicate the benefits of healthy soils to people that aren't farmers, right? How do we convince town officials, planners, others that maintaining and building healthy soils is important for communities in the nation, not just an individual farmer?
That is a great question. I do know that we have a number of resources on the Farmland Information Center. We recently pulled together a guide specific to land trusts and other entities that are protecting land to work with their easement holders, and in the cases where those are non-operating landowners, to have them work with their farmers. And so that guide is available. It's actually got our whole training linked to it. The videos are available. So that's there, and that includes some basics of soil health and why it matters, and those are really usable across the board. Also, NRCS has a number of resources of that sort. Many of them are specifically geared to farmers. Many of them are for conservation planners. So there's a lot of really good resources out there, and we are continuing to kind of target what are some gaps in those resources. So actually, to anybody on the line, if you're finding that there are gaps, specific things that you're looking for, don't hesitate to reach out and let us know what it is that's missing, because we're always looking for what those gaps are that we should next tackle.
Great. And this is Bianca's contact email. And a few folks have asked, we will make the links that have been popping up on your screen throughout this conversation available after the call. All right, let's get to our final question. Bianca, let's start with you. Why are partnerships between researchers and farmers important to measuring the true impact of these regenerative farming practices we talk so much about these days?
That's an excellent question. And, I think in the most simple ways, people need to do the jobs that they're best at, right? Researchers are really good at measuring, at gathering data, at organizing those data, at analyzing them, and interpreting them. Those are really researchers' strengths. We get trained to do that. I went through schooling to do that. But most researchers are not farmers. Most researchers have not had their own 100 acres, 1,000 acres, 10,000 acres growing a crop, managing the equipment, managing the farm workers, managing the economics, and the whole system that's involved in managing a farm within the context of all of our agricultural community. So researchers need to do what they're best at: gathering the data, doing the analysis, doing the interpretation. Farmers need to do the farming. And when we pair researchers with farmers, and we can do that research on real operating farms, we can have farmers ask some of the questions that are the most critical ones to figure out. We can have researchers talk with farmers and have that be an interactive discussion where together between researchers and farmers, we can figure out where those gaps are and what questions need to be asked. And then farmers can manage the systems. Farmers can manage the equipment, can manage the timing of when those operations are, and how to really get those practices on the ground done just right. And researchers can study how that's happening, everything from the soil science component, the production system, the yields, the management, the economics, the social science. All of those components can be studied by researchers, but it really needs to be of how agriculture actually works on the land, so that we can get highly relevant data that can be directly translated back to what a farmer can apply.
And Barry, you've been both a farmer and a researcher, so you probably have an interesting perspective here.
Well, we had a really good example of that in Indiana, where it was called it still is called the Conservation Cropping System Initiative. It was a partnership between Extension, the State Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts, the State Department of Agriculture, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and several other conservation organizations and industry. But we paired really top farmers that had a good handle on how to make these systems work throughout the state, which we have very vast differences in geography, climate, and soils in the state. So we had regional hub farms on these top farmers, and we paired them up with our researchers at both universities and with ARS and some other folks. So getting those folks together and getting some field trials out on some of those really successful farms that really helped us get some insight and then use those same farms as training hubs. Once we were gathering data, real life data that we got to educate and provide training right there on that location where the data came from. And so it became extremely relevant to the other local farmers and local ag professionals. And so, and then the final result is, as you put that system together, now you've got an actual network that you've facilitated too, where farmers are now also sharing with other farmers. And there's a comfort level that is shared among the researchers and the farmers and the industry and the farmers, so that it's a regular communication, so that everybody's got a really nice comfort level with the communication that in a lot of places that didn't exist. And so we want our farmers and researchers on first name basis and talking to each other on a regular basis. And our conservation organizations like NRCS and our agency folks the same way. So when you put that together, when you build and you're gathering data, you're gaining data, it's a higher quality research outcome. The data is more meaningful, it's more logical, and it's more relevant to the local farmers. So I think it's more believable by their part. And it also gives us continuity of message and methods for a lot of our researchers to follow also. So it's just an example where this has really worked well.
So we're getting to the end of the conversation. We've got time, I think, for one more question from the audience. But before we start wrapping up, I just want to say one of the things that I love to see is that there are actually people in the comment threads right now listening to this conversation that are learning from each other, that are sharing links to resources in research. So thank you to everyone that is tuned in, and especially thank you to everyone that's participated by commenting and sharing thoughts and sharing links to pieces of research that might be helpful for farmers who want to implement these type of practices. This is kind of a big question, so I feel like it's a good way to end. There's a question from Steve Davies on YouTube. Do we need a moonshot type approach to carbon research? Do we need this kind of huge investment? Or do you think we're already moving in the right direction? Bianca, you announced just at the beginning of the call that there has been, this increasing investment in soil health research. But is it enough? Do we need more? What are your thoughts on that?
I think we always need more. I think of things like our NASA budget, right? I mean, we can put rockets into space, we can put satellites up there, and that's, billions of dollars have gone to researching what our place is in the solar system. We need that kind of investment in our agriculture, because that's what's going to drive whether we have the food security in 50 years from now that we do now, which is even imperfect right now. Across the globe, food security is a really big issue, and with climate layered on top of that, we're in quite the situation, and we absolutely have to harness all of the solutions. So yes, more investment is needed, and I think it can't be just coming from the federal government and state governments. It needs to come from elsewhere. I think that for our corporations that are involved in agriculture to succeed, they're going to need a continued resilient farm supply. And so I'm seeing more and more corporations really recognizing how critical it is that we go climate neutral or better, and putting their dollars toward that. And that's a really wonderful thing to see. I hope that continues. I hope that it escalates exponentially. There are also a lot of private funders. Thank you to all of those who have contributed to various efforts out there. I think that there's a lot that many who have the funds and see the importance of this can do to contribute to efforts to study more of how we need to get these systems on the ground, help farmers implement these systems, help get the technical assistance to farmers. I think that there's no limitation to what we can do if we have the resources and the overall willingness of everybody to work together in place. And I think that's really a key message I want to get across here too. We all need to be in this together. We all need to collaborate across organizations. I know often organizations like to get credit. Well, let's all share in the credit. There can be competition, but I think to whatever extent we can, we need to share the data, we need to share the insights, we need to share the approaches, we need to together come up with effective business models, for example, for ag retailers, to be able to make a livelihood by providing soil health services and really moving into that space of creating sustainability. It is such a critical issue. I can't say enough about how, yes, absolutely, we need more resources toward this. We need everybody to work together. And, you know, I'm always excited to collaborate across more organizations and really push it to another level.
What's the saying? If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. I think that's very true when it comes to this topic. Barry, any final words from you on this topic of, you know, a moonshot in funding, or just in general about soil health?
Oh yeah, I think, and the worst thing that could happen is if we spend a lot of money on research and we hold it in a box. You know, we've got to also couple that with really, we've got to reinvest in those individuals, those extension type individuals, those agency folks that take the best research and make sure that it's getting out there to the farm, to the land, where it can be implemented in the most strategic and practical manner. And so we've got to, as a society, we've got to really invest in the professionals that, and high quality, highly trained professionals that can deliver this message and deliver the latest and best technology as it comes out of the research world. And so that's, you know, that's equally as important, but absolutely, we've got to, as a society, invest in this, these scientific advancements, because we kind of know we can. We shouldn't invest a lot of money in whether we should. I mean, let's not go, but let's look at the best possible, logical, practical application method so that we can successfully implement this, not for just today, but take this and carry this on a soil health journey that we're constantly improving and making things better out there on the land. It's just, the potential is endless.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, I do want to thank the New York Farm Variability Institute, who supported this conversation. If you want to learn more about them, you can at nyfbi.org. I want to thank Barry and Bianca for joining us today. This has been an amazing conversation. I think one of our most popular and engaging we've ever done as part of one of these free range conversations series. A recording of this will be available for anyone who wants to watch it or send it to others. And like I said, we'll go into the comment threads and try and answer questions and provide links to resources where people have asked for them. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a Free Range Conversations with American Farmland Trust event. We'll talk to you next time.